Hi, my name is Justin Turner, and I prepared this presentation on mobility impairments and the health concerns associated. Individuals with impaired physical ability, usually in regards to walking, standing, lifting, grasping, in general, their mobility is impaired. Often they need mobility tools, wheelchairs, crutches, orthopedic devices, and so forth. The cause of mobility impairments is generally congenital, accidental, can be neurological, musculoskeletal, or caused by a disease. While researching the subject, I found it interesting that 8.2% of the population under 65 in Weber County reported a mobility disability uh, or impairment. Statewide, it was a touch higher at 9.1%, and I found this interesting nationally. It's at 13.7%. So a decent amount higher than what we're experiencing here, especially in Weber County, and internationally at 15%. So some social determinants of health that contribute to the disparities of individuals who suffer from mobility impairments. The biggest one that I felt applied was access. When you're immobile, it's difficult to get out and to get the access you need for healthy foods, for health care services, which are huge in that population. And transportation is another big one. If you can't drive, or if you aren't mobile enough to get to a car, and you don't have services to take you places, and you're stuck at home, that's a big problem. And public safety is obviously another one. This patient class is a lower socioeconomic status for the most part, and live in areas where they feel less safe. They're also less able to fend for themselves. Another large one is availability of resources to meet daily needs, ability to go out to the store, to get supplies, to clean your home, uh, to care for yourself. They also have less access to education, being immobile and being stuck at home with technology. Their online resources have increased, but they're still less likely to further an education because of the other difficulties they're dealing with. And job opportunities is another huge one. Individuals with impairments, physical impairments, can't do a lot of just standard jobs. Um, and that makes it difficult, especially if they're not furthering their education. Then they're extremely limited in their options as far as job opportunities go. Specific concerns to that population is generally individuals with mobility impairments are of lower socioeconomic class, and they're less likely to pursue an education as well. Um, they're more likely to develop preventable comorbidities on top of that, experience hospitalization, not have their healthcare needs met, also experience an early death, or, like I said, be unemployed. They're all issues that are prevalent in that population. The root causes of a mobility impairment are generally physical in nature, congenital, something you're born with, um, injury or illness or disease, um, any sort of medical issue that impairs your ability to move. When reviewing Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the areas that I felt the majority of that population might meet were first love and belonging. I feel like for the most part, we all have a loved one or a friend or someone that can at least partially meet that for us. Um, as well, I felt like physiological, even though there's many impairments that they experience. I feel like they get access to food, sleep, roof over their head. Uh, those kind of things are easier to meet, and I feel like the majority of that population meets those two areas of Maslow's hierarchy. The other areas that I felt like they most likely didn't meet was first safety, um, just employment, health coverage, resources to health, security in their home. I feel like those were all difficult to meet when you suffer from mobility impairment. The other one is self-actualization. I think a big one on this one is experiencing prejudice. I feel like patients or individuals who experience mobility issues also experience prejudice along with that. And lastly, epic self-esteem. When you feel like you have some sort of disability physically and are experiencing prejudice, I feel like it's difficult to fully develop or have a well-rounded or a good self-esteem, essentially. Anticipated functioning level is really broad in this population. And it really depends on the extent of their ability. They could have something minimal, slight uh, limp, or can't uh, be extremely physically active, but can still function at a high level, or they could be completely immobile. So there's a pretty broad spectrum here. For when considering it, the likely health outcomes generally aren't very good for patients who experience health or mobility impairments. Generally, they experience more comorbidities that are preventable down the road and severe medical complications and hospitalization, along with early death. Specific communicable disease or infection concerns, they're going to be at increased risk for bed sores and infection via that route, as well as their overall health is going to be poor, and along with that becomes a poor immunity. They have increased risk for flu, pneumonia, complications, and increased risk of MRSA. Non-communicable disease or infection that's associated with this population is bowel or bladder problems, mental health issues, injury, obesity, pain, arthritis, cancer, diabetes, asthma, and heart disease. When it comes to self-care and self-harm, it's difficult when you have mobility impairments. You have increased risk of mental health issues as well as depression, which is going to lead to increased risk of self-harm, as well as increased risk of learning disability and substance abuse, both which add to increased risk of self-harm and self-care as well. You're less likely to care for yourself when you're in a depressed state or when you have addiction to substances. You're more likely to be a victim of abuse when you have a mobility impairment, largely in part or due to the fact that you're an easy target for someone who's looking to usurp power or abuse others.